The Galactic Empire, a vast interstellar power, had been embroiled in a galaxy-wide war for centuries. On countless worlds, empires and rebel factions fought for control, and the imperial forces were growing weary. The Empire, despite its technological advancements, had overextended itself. Its armies were spread thin, and its resources stretched beyond their limits. Desperation had set in. What the Empire needed was an elite force, one capable of executing the most dangerous missions with unmatched precision. They needed the best. And they turned their eyes to Earth. On Earth, the United States Navy SEALs were considered the pinnacle of human military expertise. Known for their courage, skill, and ruthlessness in battle, the SEALs were feared and respected across the world. Their training was legendary, their accomplishments unmatched. The Empire's emissaries knew they had found the perfect soldiers to fill their ranks. They approached Earth's governments with an offer that could not be ignored, an invitation to join the Galactic Empire's forces. At first, the offer was met with disbelief. Many questioned the legitimacy of the Empire, the validity of the offer. But as the Empire's representatives demonstrated their power, showing off advanced technology, superior weaponry, and the kind of technology that Earth had never even dreamed of, skepticism turned into curiosity. The representatives promised riches, advanced technology, power, and most enticingly, a chance to fight in the galaxy's deadliest war. It was a chance for humanity to not only prove its worth but to claim a seat at the galactic table. Some saw this as an opportunity for personal glory, others, as a path to survival. The decision to join wasn't easy. There were those who resisted, questioning the morality of serving an empire that had yet to be understood. Was the Empire just? Would they be treated as equals, or would they be mere pawns in a larger galactic game? But the appeal of the unknown, the allure of adventure and glory, won out in the end. A selection process was organized, and it was the Navy SEALs who were handpicked by the Empire's recruiters. They had been carefully chosen for their unmatched skills and expertise, skills that were now in high demand across the galaxy. The first group of SEALs, led by their commanding officers, boarded the Imperial ships with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The weight of the decision was heavy on their shoulders. Earth was their home. The Empire was a distant, unfamiliar force. Could they truly trust the Empire's promises? Or were they about to become part of something far darker than they could imagine? There was no going back. The moment they set foot on the Empire's starships, they realized how far they had come. The ships were vast and efficient, a far cry from the technology they had left behind on Earth. The speed of the ships was almost incomprehensible, as they shot through space like something out of science fiction. What had been an incomprehensible offer was now their reality. They were no longer just soldiers of Earth. They were now soldiers of the Galactic Empire. They were quickly introduced to the Empire's military hierarchy and trained in the Empire's advanced technology. New weapons, new gadgets, and enhanced armor systems that defied all known laws of physics were now at their disposal. The SEALs were awed by the possibilities, but there was an underlying unease. They had been promised a chance to fight for glory, but what exactly would they be fighting for? And who would they be fighting against? It was only after their training was complete that they received their first mission, to go to the farthest reaches of the galaxy and neutralize a growing threat from a rebel faction. The mission was classified, details scarce, but what they were told was enough. An enemy had appeared that posed a significant threat to Imperial power. Their objective was simple: neutralize the threat, no questions asked. When they arrived at the planet, they were briefed on the situation. The rebels, a group of alien insurgents, had been fighting the Empire's expansion for years. The Empire wanted them eradicated. The SEALs were used to fighting enemies on Earth, but this was different. These were not human enemies, and the stakes were higher than anything they had ever faced before. The galaxy was a vast, complex place, and the Empire was more than just a political entity. It was a force of control and order. The SEALs didn't have the luxury of understanding the larger picture. They had a mission to complete. The battle that followed was swift and brutal. The SEALs did what they did best. They executed their mission with ruthless efficiency. The rebels were caught off guard, their defenses crumbling in the face of the SEALs' superior training and technology. But as the mission unfolded, something unsettling happened. The SEALs discovered that the rebels weren't the savage criminals they had been led to believe. In fact, they were a group of farmers and civilians, people who were simply trying to protect their homes from the Empire's brutal expansion. It was a harsh realization. These were not the faceless enemies they had imagined. They had been sent to destroy innocents. The question began to gnaw at them. Had they made the right choice in signing up for this mission? The first seeds of doubt were planted. As the SEALs continued their campaign across the galaxy, the missions grew darker. They were ordered to subdue planets, wipe out entire species, and bring entire civilizations to their knees. The once clear lines between right and wrong became blurry. What had started as a pursuit of honor and glory began to feel more like an obligation to a system they didn't fully understand. Despite the growing discomfort, the rewards were undeniable. The Empire's power, technology, and status were intoxicating. The SEALs, now part of an unstoppable force, were promised even more: advanced weapons, faster ships, and greater influence across the galaxy. They were becoming more than just soldiers. They were becoming legends. But with each mission, the questions kept coming. What was the cost of serving such an empire? What was the price of absolute power? As the SEALs embarked on mission after mission, the lines between duty and morality became increasingly difficult to draw. What started as an opportunity for human achievement was beginning to feel more like a descent into a moral abyss. They were fighting not for survival, but for dominance. The galaxy was now their battleground, and the rules of war had changed forever. The truth was, they didn't know what they had signed up for. And they were about to find out the hard way. The Navy SEALs had barely gotten their feet wet when the reality of the Empire's operations began to set in. The advanced technology they'd been promised was real, but it came with a cost. The first mission left them shaken. They had been sent to deal with an insurgency, but instead of facing a well-armed and organized rebel force, they found a group of civilians, farmers, and families who had taken up arms to protect their homes. The Empire's objectives were simple: eliminate the threat, no questions asked. The SEALs had followed their orders without hesitation, but the faces of the innocent victims haunted them. This wasn't what they had expected. The Empire had painted the rebels as ruthless, but they had been nothing more than desperate people fighting for survival. It was hard to ignore the sense of guilt that began to creep into their minds. They had been used as pawns in a game they didn't fully understand, and it felt wrong. As the SEALs moved on to their next mission, they tried to shake off the nagging doubts. The next assignment, however, was no less complicated. The rebels on this planet weren't much different, civilians fighting against an oppressive regime. The SEALs were beginning to see a disturbing pattern. The Empire didn't just fight wars, it imposed control. The wars weren't about protecting the innocent, they were about crushing any opposition, no matter the cost. Each mission revealed a new layer of the Empire's ruthlessness. Whole populations were wiped out in the name of progress. Planets were bombed, their resources harvested, and their inhabitants enslaved. The SEALs had been taught that they were fighting for freedom, for justice. But with each mission, it became harder to reconcile the reality with their training. They were sent to planets to pacify entire civilizations, to break their spirits, and bring them under the Empire's iron grip. It wasn't about liberating anyone, it was about control. And that was becoming more and more apparent. The SEALs started to feel the weight of their decisions. They were elite soldiers, trained to follow orders, to never question the mission. But now, they were questioning everything. Was this what they had signed up for? The pay and power were tempting, but the cost of those rewards was beginning to feel too high. They had become instruments of oppression, tools in the Empire's quest for dominance. And the more they learned about the Empire's inner workings, the more they realized how deep the corruption ran. The Empire's bureaucracy was vast, its officials cruel and unfeeling. They didn't see the people they subjugated as anything more than resources to be exploited. The SEALs learned that the Empire wasn't just about military might. It was a machine that fed on the suffering of others. They were trained to ignore the cost of war, but now the cost was staring them in the face. They had killed innocents, destroyed homes, and shattered families. In the name of order, they had become part of an empire that saw no value in life except as a means to an end. And yet, despite the growing doubts, the rewards kept coming. The empire offered them more advanced technology, more resources, more power. The SEALs were offered leadership positions, given access to the empire's most coveted secrets. They were treated like royalty, given everything they could ever want, except peace of mind. The more they received, the more they realized how hollow it all was. The galaxy was their playground, but it was a playground built on the suffering of others. The SEALs began to split into two factions. Some embraced the power and prestige the empire offered, willing to do whatever it took to rise through the ranks. They justified their actions, telling themselves that they were doing their duty, that the ends justified the means. Others, however, began to feel the weight of their conscience. They had joined the empire to fight for something greater, but they now saw that they were just another tool in the hands of a ruthless regime. The internal conflict began to tear them apart. The SEALs who remained loyal to the empire's cause began to question the loyalty of their comrades. Were they traitors? Were they weak for questioning their orders? Meanwhile, those who began to question their loyalty to the empire were starting to see a glimmer of hope. They had been lied to, manipulated, and forced to serve a cause they no longer believed in. The realization that they were nothing more than pawns in a larger game fueled their desire to find a way out. The mission that followed was a turning point. The SEALs were sent to a distant planet to eliminate a rebel leader who had been orchestrating resistance efforts against the Empire. They were told that the leader was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Imperial soldiers. The mission was clear: capture or kill the leader. But when they arrived, they discovered the truth. The rebel leader was not a terrorist. They were an advocate for peace, trying to unite various alien species to resist the Empire's expansion. And just like the other rebels, they were willing to fight for their homes, their families, and their freedom. The SEALs were left in a moral quandary. The mission wasn't as clear-cut as they had been led to believe. The Empire's narrative didn't match the reality they were witnessing. They had been sent to kill a person who, in their hearts, they knew was fighting for the right cause. The internal conflict among the SEALs reached a boiling point. Some still wanted to follow the orders they had been given, while others wanted to protect the rebel leader, to help them fight back against the Empire. In the end, the SEALs made a decision. They freed the rebel leader, allowing them to escape with their forces. It was a decision that would change everything. The loyalty of some SEALs to the Empire was shattered. The realization that they had been fighting for the wrong cause, that they had been complicit in the Empire's war of conquest, was too much for them to ignore. The SEALs who had made the decision to defy their orders knew that they were now marked as traitors. The Empire would never forgive them for this act of rebellion. But they also knew that they could no longer ignore the truth. The cost of their actions had been too great, and it was time to fight for something worth fighting for. The galaxy was vast, and there was a chance for them to make a real difference. They had already crossed the line. There was no going back. As the SEALs left the battlefield, the weight of their decision hung heavy on their shoulders. They had chosen a path that would lead them away from the Empire and into the unknown. They had made a choice to fight for something more than power or glory. It wasn't about the rewards anymore. It was about fighting for what was right. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but they were ready. They had taken the first step toward redemption. The rebellion was gaining momentum, and the truth about the Empire's actions was becoming harder to ignore. The SEALs, once loyal soldiers of the Galactic Empire, now found themselves questioning everything they had been taught. They had signed up to protect their world, to become part of something larger, but what they had discovered in the Empire's heart had shattered that ideal. The power they had once sought had turned into a curse, and the promises of glory felt hollow. The galaxy was no longer a place of opportunity. It was a battlefield of oppression, and they were part of it. The SEALs had come to realize that the Empire's expansion was not about order or peace. It was about control. It was about crushing any resistance, no matter the cost. The missions they had once carried out with ruthless efficiency were now seen in a new light. They had been complicit in the destruction of innocent lives, the subjugation of entire species, and the erasure of cultures. They had been pawns in the Empire's game, and they had unknowingly advanced its agenda of terror. The mission that had set them on this path of doubt was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern, one that repeated itself across the galaxy. The SEALs had been sent to eliminate resistance forces, but they were discovering that these forces were not the savages the Empire had claimed them to be. They were fighting for their freedom, for their survival. And in every battle, the SEALs had stood on the side of the oppressors. The more they learned, the more the questions piled up. Was it too late to make things right? Could they walk away from the Empire now that they knew the truth? The seeds of rebellion had been planted in the hearts of the SEALs. They had started to question their loyalty to the Empire and what they stood for. Some of them began to openly defy orders, sabotaging missions, leaking information to rebel factions, and trying to reach out to other parts of the galaxy that still fought for freedom. These actions, though small, were dangerous. The Empire did not tolerate disobedience, and those who were found guilty of treason were dealt with swiftly and brutally. But not all the SEALs shared the same views. There were those who, despite the mounting evidence, still clung to the Empire's promises. They believed in the Empire's power, in its vision of a united galaxy. To them, the rebellion was nothing more than chaos. They saw the Empire as the only force capable of bringing stability to the galaxy, no matter how many planets had to be crushed in the process. These SEALs were loyal to the Empire, even when it meant killing their own kind, betraying their values, and becoming part of a machine of destruction. For them, the idea of honor had been twisted beyond recognition. The division among the SEALs was becoming irreparable. Those who had begun to question their role in the Empire were growing bolder. They knew that the Empire was not the force of good it claimed to be. They had seen the suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, and the tyranny it imposed. These SEALs began to meet in secret, planning their next moves, discussing how they could fight back against the Empire and join the rebellion they had once been sent to eliminate. They were no longer just soldiers. They were becoming rebels, and the Empire would see them as enemies. One of the most shocking discoveries was the revelation of a hidden faction within the Empire, one that had been working against the Empire's brutal regime for years. The rebellion that had once seemed disorganized and powerless was not as weak as it had appeared. This faction, operating from the shadows, had managed to gather enough support to challenge the Empire's grip on the galaxy. They had been gathering resources, recruiting soldiers, and planning a revolution that could shake the foundations of the Empire. The SEALs, now divided, faced a choice. They could remain loyal to the Empire and continue fighting its wars, or they could join the rebellion, risking everything to stand up for what they believed was right. It was no longer about survival. It was about making a choice between honor and corruption. The SEALs who chose to join the rebellion knew that they were signing their own death warrants. The Empire would stop at nothing to eliminate those who betrayed it. As the tension between the two factions grew, the SEALs were forced into action. The Empire had become aware of the growing dissent within its ranks. Leaders were sent to deal with the problem, and the SEALs knew that a confrontation was inevitable. Some prepared for the battle that was sure to come, while others began to fear the consequences of their defection. The loyalty they once held to the Empire was now a distant memory, replaced by a desperate need to make things right, even if it meant facing the wrath of their former comrades. The rebellion was not just about fighting the Empire, it was about a struggle for identity. The SEALs who had once defined themselves by their loyalty to Earth, by their duty to protect and serve, were now faced with a choice that would define their legacy. Would they stand with the Empire, or would they stand with those who fought for freedom? For some, the choice was clear: the Empire had betrayed them, and they could no longer be a part of its oppressive machine. For others, the idea of abandoning their comrades and everything they had fought for was too much to bear. The clash between these two ideologies would determine the fate of the galaxy. As the SEALs began to make their final preparations for what was to come, they realized that they were not just fighting for their own survival. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. They had the power to bring an end to the Empire's reign of terror, but it would come at a cost. The battles ahead would be fierce, and the risks were high. They had chosen their path, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. The rebellion was gaining strength, and the SEALs were no longer just soldiers of the Empire. They were becoming symbols of resistance, standing against an empire that had once promised them everything. The choice had been made. There was no turning back now. With the rebellion rising, the SEALs knew that the final battle was fast approaching. The fate of the galaxy was in their hands, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had crossed the line, and now they would fight for the future of the galaxy, not as soldiers of the Empire, but as warriors for freedom. The war had only just begun. The final battle was inevitable. The rebellion had reached its breaking point, and the SEALs, now fully entrenched in the fight against the Empire, were preparing for the most dangerous confrontation of their lives. The choice had been made. They would no longer serve the Empire. They had crossed the line, and now there was no going back. The galaxy's future would be decided in this battle, and the SEALs knew that their role in it would determine the outcome. The rebellion had grown stronger with each passing day. The hidden faction within the Empire had provided crucial information, weapons, and resources to the Resistance, and the SEALs, once pawns in the Empire's game, had become leaders of the Resistance. The loyalty of many had shifted, and those who had once fought for the Empire were now fighting to bring it down. But the Empire wasn't going to let this act of defiance go unanswered. The full might of the Imperial forces was about to descend on them. The SEALs, now seasoned rebels, were ready for the fight. They had seen the horrors of the Empire up close, and they had fought alongside the rebels who had lost everything in their struggle for freedom. It was no longer about survival. It was about justice. They had witnessed firsthand the brutal tactics of the Empire, how it crushed entire civilizations, enslaved innocent beings, and manipulated entire star systems. They had been part of that system, but now they were determined to destroy it. The battle was set to take place on the Empire's capital world, the heart of the Imperial regime. This was not just a battle for territory, it was a battle for the soul of the galaxy. The SEALs and their rebel allies were poised to strike at the very core of the Empire's power. It was a mission that carried the weight of the galaxy's future on their shoulders. The SEALs knew that the odds were stacked against them. The Empire's forces were vast, and its military might was unmatched. But they had something the Empire didn't. They had the will to fight for a cause greater than themselves. They were no longer just soldiers. They were freedom fighters. They had nothing left to lose. The plan was simple: infiltrate the Empire's capital, sabotage its defenses, and take down the Imperial leadership. The SEALs had trained for this moment their entire lives. They had faced impossible odds before, and they had come out on top. This time would be no different. They knew that the enemy was ruthless, but they also knew that they had something the Empire didn't: a sense of purpose. The SEALs weren't fighting for power or glory anymore. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy, for the freedom of its people, and for redemption. The first wave of attacks was swift. The SEALs and their rebel allies launched a series of coordinated strikes against Imperial strongholds across the capital. They disabled communication systems, destroyed military installations, and created chaos within the Imperial ranks. The Empire's forces were caught off guard, and the resistance was able to gain ground faster than anyone had anticipated. The SEALs, now operating in full stealth mode, moved swiftly through the capital, taking out key targets and sowing fear within the Empire's leadership. But the Empire wasn't going down without a fight. Within hours, the Imperial forces retaliated. The Empire's elite soldiers, the same ones who had once served alongside the SEALs, were now sent to hunt them down. The once loyal soldiers of the Empire found themselves face to face with their former comrades. It was a moment of reckoning. The SEALs had to confront the reality of what they had become. They had betrayed everything they once stood for, and now they had to face the consequences. The final confrontation took place in the heart of the Imperial Palace. The SEALs and their allies had made their way deep into the palace, and they were now only a few steps away from their ultimate goal: the fall of the Empire's leadership. The Emperor, a cruel and unrelenting ruler, was the mastermind behind the Empire's oppressive regime. His downfall would signal the end of an era of tyranny. But getting to him wouldn't be easy. The SEALs knew that this would be their most dangerous mission yet. As they neared the Emperor's throne room, the SEALs were met with resistance. Imperial guards, heavily armed and fiercely loyal to the Emperor, stood in their way. The battle was brutal. The SEALs fought with everything they had, but they were also fighting against the very people they had once considered their brothers in arms. The line between enemy and ally had blurred, and the SEALs were forced to make quick, decisive choices. Each decision could mean the difference between life and death, and the weight of those choices was not lost on them. The battle raged on as the SEALs fought their way through the palace, but they knew that the true test was still ahead. The Emperor was waiting. When they finally reached the throne room, they were met with the chilling sight of the ruler who had controlled the galaxy for so long. The Emperor, sitting atop his throne, was a figure of power and cruelty. His gaze was cold, and he knew that the SEALs had come for him. The confrontation was intense. Words were exchanged, but they were meaningless. The SEALs had come for one purpose: to end the Emperor's reign of terror. The Emperor, however, was not willing to go down without a fight. He summoned his most elite soldiers to defend him, and the SEALs were forced to fight one last battle. The Emperor's forces were overwhelming, but the SEALs had one advantage: they were fighting for freedom, for something worth dying for. The battle ended in a bloody climax. The Emperor was defeated, and his reign of tyranny came to an end. The SEALs had accomplished their mission, but the cost was high. Many of their comrades had fallen, and the scars of the conflict would remain with them forever. The galaxy, however, was free. The Empire was no more, and the rebels had won. In the aftermath, the surviving SEALs reflected on the path they had taken. They had gone from being instruments of oppression to symbols of resistance. They had fought for redemption, not just for themselves but for the galaxy. The victory was bittersweet. They had destroyed the Empire, but the galaxy was in ruins. There was much work to be done, and the SEALs knew that their journey was far from over. The war for freedom was just beginning. The galaxy was no longer under the thumb of the Empire, but the SEALs had learned a hard truth: true power didn't come from domination. It came from the will to fight for what was right. They had started as soldiers, but they had become something greater. They had become heroes, and their legacy would be remembered for generations to come.